is 8:29, which means this is not the after party with Lance Hahn just yet, because right now we're still in pre-show mode. But we're here and we're live so that our guy Josh Oot can get us all set up and get our links all situated and everything else, and then we're going to be off and running here in just a moment. Hey,
but I do think that Josh can hear us.
He can hear us.
I do think Josh can hear us, which means that we can say all sorts of negative things, and all he can do is type it. And you don't want to type that in the chat.
Yeah.
So I would probably keep it to yourself, Josh. Whatever negative we say about you, you just need to suck it up right now, dude.
Well,
because this is not the time for you to respond.
And he's typing as Bridgeway Christian Church, so he has to behave himself. So
that's true. That's true. Hey, Patty Howell joined us. Hi, friend. Hello.
All right. Josh's daughter is listening. That's great. Oh my gosh.
Hi, Miss Kathy. Okay. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah. All right, we're rolling. It's 8:30. We're gonna do this thing. So hey, it's the after party with Pastor Lance. We thought we were done. We are not. We are back, and we are back. But except this is different than any other episode of the after party we've ever done. In that, Pastor Lance, you preached 4 sermons this weekend.
Yes, I did. Absolutely. It was probably not the best, but just talking about kind of the atmosphere. Quick, raise your hand if you're in church. Oh wait, that was just me. So just for all of you to know that being in there, hi Miss LaShonda, that just to let you know kind of the experience coming into church and everything. You know, we were so pumped about everything being live, and all of a sudden we get in there and we had to really talk ourselves through the process because everything had kind of shifted up. And so one of the first things that I did is I talked with the worship team, because when you are leading worship to a live group of family members, it is electric. And when you are leading to a group of family members through cameras, it's very, very different. And so I had a little bit of a talk with them, and I said, first of all, I shared a little bit what I shared at church. If you got a chance to connect in with church today, you guys heard a lot of that. But I shared with them, I said, we are in this predicament because of the power of praise. And I said, I need you to understand that what you are doing and where you are leading us today, the very purpose of this is that every single one of our members, I wanted to be able to sing out loud and proudly in their homes so we could all join together. I said, you have thousands of people. It may be the largest crowd you've ever led worship in. And they are right through those cameras. And we need to take some time and realize all of us, in our homes, we need joy. We need time of connection with God. We need to pour out praise to his name. We need to notify the enemy that he is mighty and powerful. And so really just talking about the meat of everything that we're doing. And then of course we went into it and they were so sweet. The worship team was on fire and they were joking and laughing with each other and they were praising the Lord. And there was like a sprinkling of us that were all having to be in that room. And we were all singing out loud in our little masks, and we were going to town and jumping around and had our arms up in the air. And so once again, that little tiny bit of us that were in there, we were really worshiping God. Well, then when I came out and I was trying to connect with all of you through the cameras and everything, let me just say one thing. And I know we're going to get into serious stuff, but I just have to say one thing. Humor in a dead room does not translate. I understand that you guys are watching me and you're like, yeah, that wasn't very funny. I know that, but I can't just be serious all the time. So I get looking through that screen, you're like, you know what? It was not all that funny. Okay, I get it. It wasn't even actually that funny of a message. I'm just telling you. So I do want to just encourage all of you. Thank you.
Somebody has turned on very loud music in my house, apparently. I'm going to mute myself so that it does not interfere with this any longer and take care of that.
That was the funniest thing I have ever heard. That was awesome. It sounded like a polka band that was heavy metal just attacked his home. That was super funny. So I know, once again, we're going to get into some serious stuff, but that was awesome. That literally made my day. Just hearing that. So let me just let you know,
okay.
All of you.
Wait, we're just going to stop everything right now. I'm going to tell you what just happened. So this is really funny because here's why this happened. Okay. So I'm in my upstairs room right now. I can't believe this. Anyway, we normally have a little like Alexa hockey puck up here, but my wife has moved it down to the garage. The garage is right underneath where we are right now. We have a light bulb that somebody gave us that has a Bluetooth speaker in it. My wife is downstairs in the garage. She does chalk art. She's doing chalk art on our driveway right now. And she decided she'd turn on some Lindsey Sterling, who's an amazing violinist, to just have while she's doing what she's doing. And it connected to our Bluetooth speaker up here. So it started going super loud. So anyway, we just got interrupted by the Bluetooth light bulb in my bonus room. Live broadcast.
I believe that woman is a great violinist. I think that out of context, that sounded like a cacophony of an attack. So I'm just letting you know that. Yes. Okay. All I was trying to say
to whatever we were talking about.
It's super neat to see your faces. Yes, it's super neat to be able to see you, Dar and Andrea and Joseph Sereno. Man, so it's really neat that you guys are all with us. And so we're going to talk through some of this stuff that's really, really important to us, to all of us, because this is our family. This is our home, because it's God's house, right? So we're going to talk about the issues, and obviously, we want to hear from you, right? We want to be able to know your heart on the matter. Obviously, if we filibuster and we just keep typing and no one else can type in, that's probably not going to work out. But it is really neat because I realize not all of us see these things the same way. So my heart is really just to help you kind of understand the processing of different things that we went through, not to try to get you to agree with everything that we say or that we do, right? So I just need you to know that in advance. We are not here trying to win over people. We're trying to get people to understand fully where we are at. So anyway, I'll stop talking. Yep. You were going to say something.
Cool. Brian. Yeah. So if you're new to the after party, kind of the way this works is it's meant to be interactive. We want to be able to interact with you in the comments. So by all means, please feel free if you've got questions regarding some things that are said, that as Pastor Lance and I explain them, we'd love to be able to answer those things. And I think what Pastor Lance said is so important, that we recognize there are a variety of issues in play here, especially surrounding the decision to go back to online only services, and we know that different ones of us that on our leadership team have different opinions on this stuff, and we're really wrestling through it. But what we want to do is, just for the sake of transparency and unity and understanding, is we want you to understand the process. We want you to understand what went into us making the decision that we made, and our hope is that at least all of us can leave this conversation with a better sense of, okay, even if we think differently about what the right course of action is, there's a lot of unity in what we all want, and we're all just trying to get after the same stuff. So by all means, please, as we're sharing about some different things, please leave us questions. We want to know. By all means, you're welcome to leave snide remarks, or if random music goes off in my house, which yes, Nathan McInturf, that was Lindsey Sterling. Feel free to make fun of me, or make fun of any of us for anything. But we're hopeful that this can be, yes, it's serious, a lot of this stuff, but we hope it can be just a fun and informative time as well. So Pastor Lance, as I'm distracted by Larry Walker, my house is filled with leprechauns, if only. Pastor Lance, why don't you can you maybe, we're now a little bit into this, can you take us through, it was a kind of a wild last week for a lot of us, to take us through the process of kind of how we arrived at the decision that we did, and everything that went into that process.
Yeah. So once again, we really want to be transparent about everything. So when we first found out about the information, and this is once again being honest about myself. So it was brought up by one of the members of my leadership team, and they said, "Hey, I think we need to talk about this." I did not realize that we had a new mandate that came into play on July 1st. From the governor. I was under the impression that was an old directive and that we had already handled it and we're kind of moving forward. And so I kind of, at that point, just kind of quieted the conversation and said, listen, we don't need to rehash this over again. Well, once again, it was my bad because I did not understand it was a new thing. So I ended up getting a call from Pastor Brian, and he and I talked about it, and he said, hey, just so you know, we need to actually come to a determination. This was new. And so at that point, we began to process it. And I'm trying to think of what day that was, because we were coming right up on a weekend, I felt like. And so what we ended up having to do was that we could not gather our leadership team together. The way that we make decisions at Bridgeway is that if it is a philosophy decision or a body issue decision in terms of whether it's correction piece or whether or not it's some heavy ministry piece, the elder board gets involved. So most day-to-day activity is handled by the senior leadership team. That is made up of me, Pastor Brian, Jeff Eberhardt, Josh Oot, Heidi Coffrin, and Paul Tomei, right? So we make up the senior leadership team. But when you get into bigger issues like this, it needed to include the elder board. The elder board consists of Pastor Brian and myself being the staff representatives. And then it is Mitch Andrews, it is Keith Ritchie, it is Lane Gibbs, it is Anthony Seidler, and hold on, I just forgot. I'm missing one. Who am I missing? Oh, shoot.
Take Keith.
Oh, Dale Johnston. Thank you, Dale. Sorry about that.
Dale Johnston.
I already said Keith. Dale Johnston. So we ended up saying, now the elder board does not meet till Tuesday. Our senior leadership team meets on Monday. So we ended up going, okay, we got to let the weekend go forward, and we will meet on Monday. And then on Monday, we talked through it and said, we need to have an emergency meeting with both boards. And we said, let's do that on Tuesday. Excuse me, Monday was a holiday. That was the other thing that threw everything off, right? So it was the 4th of July weekend holiday for us. So everything got pushed off till Tuesday. Tuesday, we weren't even supposed to have a meeting. We called a special meeting, and we had told everyone, listen, we need to fast and pray before all this, and we're going to come and have a meeting. So we fasted for a couple days, and we just sought the Lord. We then all came together, and I just said, before I say a word, I need everyone to tell me what they heard from the Lord or where they're at. Everyone downloaded and shared their thoughts. At the end, I shared my thoughts on it. And I said, and by the time when all those voices came out, I just need you to understand almost every opinion on the subject was presented at that meeting. We had a shocking widespread, like a shotgun spread of opinions in that room. So if I was looking for, and I was hoping for, that I was going to just come in and the Lord was going to get us all on the same page and it was going to be a unanimous decision, yeah, that didn't happen. So it was all over the map. So then I said, all right, now that we have heard everything, I need everyone to then go back, seek the Lord, and just sit and think about what is going on. What are we really needing to do? Then we have to meet together and we have to make a call. We were coming up on a weekend because that was a Tuesday. So we were coming up and I said, we need to make that decision by 5 p.m. on Wednesday. So everyone went back, they came back in, and then I said, I need to make the decision on behalf of this church. So I want to be very clear to everybody. It was a full, both teams, examining things, sorting it out with the Lord, bringing in their opinions, and then I needed to make the final call. So if people want to know, well, how was the final call made? That is on me. The final call was on me. Now, it was based on what we had. At that point, I processed through all the information and I made the decision I did. So that is the process. Why I made the decision I did. Obviously, we want to get into that, but I don't want to skip over any questions that did come up that I wasn't paying attention to. I was too busy talking. Did you see anything that we need to address here?
Not a ton as it relates to what exactly we're talking about. Maybe a couple of things that we might want to circle back to as we get there. But I think that just to reiterate something that you said, as someone who's obviously intimately involved in the process, I was one of the people sharing my opinion and writing it down and praying and fasting and all of this stuff. I think that One of our elders said something that I thought was really great at the start of our meeting. Lance, you of course were there, and he said that he sort of hoped it would be a split decision so that we could go back and say, pretty much no matter what your perspective was, it was represented in that room. And that is certainly the case. And I think what was beautiful to see, but at the same time, that's challenging, right? Like we're so blessed here at Bridgeway. Like there's such wonderful camaraderie amongst the SLT and the elder board. Like it's pretty rare that there's significant disagreement on a major decision, which is a wonderful blessing. But at the same time, it was agonizing, I think, for all of us. It was tremendous tension in my spirit. I don't like, these are, we have such great people on both of those teams. I don't like disagreement, right? I want us to be together on this. So the fact that we were really struggling was a challenge. But at the same time, what was really beautiful is there was complete unity about we all wanted the same things. We all want, at the end of the day, what's best, what most glorifies God, what's best for Bridgeway and our congregation, right? Like there was no question we all wanted those things. And I really felt a deep level of respect and love amongst our teams, even as we were expressing opinions that in some cases were diametrically opposed from one another, which I thought was a great testament. I don't know how you and I ended up on the elder board and the SLT. We're sort of bringing the overall quality down, but really just a great quality of people, the rest of the way, and just a testament to their hearts, which I thought was really beautiful. So anyway.
I think that's super well said. As far as the agonizing portion, let me just reiterate what Pastor Brian said. I care very, very deeply for my staff. I care very deeply for unity. And the schism and split that this created in polar opposite opinions and firmly held opinions was very, very hard on our spirit. So that I don't want to make that seem any less than it was. I can suggest to you that this is a very, very trying season. So of course we're smiling and we're joking about it now, but ultimately this has been really hard. So a couple questions that did get brought up that I would like to address before we get into the decision specifically on why it was made. Who or how was the letter to the governor penned? That's a great question. It was specifically me. When I sat down, I needed to present out the final determination based on the two letters. So I read to our SLT and I sent to our elders the final determination, which was in the letter that you received, and then also through an email. And I penned the letter to the governor and I said, I need all of you to pray through whether you will sign this. And we got back a unanimous, everyone would sign the governor's letter. Right. So that's where it came from. And then there was a couple other questions. Side note, story about the picture behind me is just a flower picture. It's decorating. Oh. Side note. Somebody said that Jay Sekulow has started a lawsuit against California for making the order to shut down worship. Yes, I hear you. What were you going to say, Pastor Brian?
Okay. Well, I think it's a great question that someone brought up. How can we say worship through song is mandated by God, have the state shut that down, and not call it religious persecution?
Yeah, no,
because that's something that we've said that we don't believe this is religious persecution. So maybe, but I think that's a great question. So maybe could you speak to that, Pastor Lance?
I sure can. So I received a number of feedback pieces that stated that exact thing, which was that this was religious persecution. Now, so let me give you my reasoning. It is very likely that maybe you see it in a different way. I'm going to tell you what I was operating off of. So here's what I wrote to someone that had asked me this question. I said, I do not believe that this was religious persecution for the following reasons. And I gave 4 reasons. Number 1, religious persecution is directly and purposely towards religious institutions for the purpose of seizing their religious activity. Now, I will agree there has been blatant and hidden persecution all over the world ever since Christianity was breathed out. This mandate and process, in my opinion, does not have the same markings as all the persecution I've witnessed. I do believe that there are a lot of different groups and leaders, even in America, that want to eliminate the church, and they're lobbying for that. I don't believe this is part of that. So first of all, that's the statement that I don't believe it's religious persecution. Why? Number 2, It's based not on the spirit of what we do in the church, lifting up God, but on the bodily function of what it requires, expelling droplets through singing and speaking. There is no mention of God being a concern whatsoever. So if we're going to go biblical, and once again, we can all talk about opinions, but if we're going to talk about biblical persecution, it was directly tied every single time to the person of Jesus or to God's name, that you will no longer speak in the name of God. And it was because of God that it was a violation to the emperor, that it was a violation to their society. It had nothing to do with physical acts, and this is going to cause a problem for health reasons. That was not the issue. Now, the other thing is that number 3, churches, even in our area, have been a hotbed of contagion. I happen to have a pastor friend that I know who's on a respirator right now because of COVID that broke out in the church. And so the threat was real, not fabricated. So it wasn't that they were linking to something that wasn't real and they were just giving a smoke screen. There was actually a real connection point. And then 4, similar non-religious activities and groupings were stopped as well, namely bars, clubs, sporting activities, etc. So the commonality was any locations of close-knit human contact of groupings. It didn't have anything to do with a religious versus non-religious, right? Yeah. So there's a bunch of other reasons, but that's kind of the key reason.
Yeah.
So let me say one more piece on this. I did not agree to stop praise in our building. When I made that decision that we would not ban singing in our building, I didn't do it because I thought it was religious persecution. I did it because it was wrong. I believe that it was an ignorant determination based on a lack of respect and a lack of knowledge of the Lord and what the church does and what it's for. But disinterest or even dislike does not make this persecution. I do not have any information supporting that Governor Newsom is a fan or friend of the church. That does not mean that it is religious persecution, even if he wishes the church would go away, which I don't know what he thinks. I'm telling you, I'm not seeing the markings.
Yeah. Yeah, and for this to be a constitutional issue, then what would have to be banned is any sort of worship of God. So, for example, we're perfectly free to, and we're talking right now. Like I've been in conversations with different people on our leadership team today about how in the next couple of weeks can we get some sort of outdoor praise and worship thing going on. We're going to talk about the power of singing and how it's not like we don't have a sing along when we come together for church on Sunday morning. Like there's a power in that is important and significant, and Pastor Lance is going to share how that played into our decision to not have services in the building. But it's important to recognize we're free and even encouraged to sing outdoors. If you look at what's interesting is the mandate from the California Department of Public Health. It says that religious organizations are encouraged to continue to provide online services. So if you want to look at it a different way, our secular government is actively encouraging the exercise of religious messages, Christian and otherwise. So yes, it's there is some ignorance there, and I agree with Pastor Lance on that there's probably a lack of appreciation for what it is we're doing when we gather as a body to sing, and I think it's very unfortunate that. And I wonder like what the process was where the decision was made, but I certainly wish maybe some more, I don't know, thought had been put in, especially for buildings as large as ours. It seems like you could have come up with a solution, but anyway, I think that it's important to point out that there's a key difference here between what is religious persecution and what is maybe ignorance or just a decision that really inconveniences us in some significant ways. And it's important we recognize that those are not the same. So back to you, Lance. What are we talking about next year?
There's another great question. It said, why do we say mandate? I'm on the government website and it says considerations and guidance. This was actually one of the long discussions we had behind the scenes in our office, because we kept going back through, well, does it say this? Well, it says in the document itself that it is consideration and guidance. Yet at the same time, outside of that document, it was doing the same thing that it was doing to restaurants, which was, we'll shut down your business. So even if it's called a suggestion or a guideline, it actually ends up being a mandate, because if activity can be ceased, it means that it is now a rule. It is no longer, hey, this is a good idea for you. This was actually saying, this is actually what we need to do if we want to continue business the same way we were doing it before. That's why we called it a mandate. And then it says now this is a part I'm going to need you, Pastor Brian, to help me sort out, because I think it's a good question. I'm not sure I'm understanding it. It says, you stated before that you were going to follow the guidelines. To not do so because you or we don't like them or agree with them would still make you dishonest. Do you know what that means? I'm trying to sort it out because I think it's an important question. I stated that we're going to follow the guidelines. To not do so because we don't like them and agree with them would still make you dishonest. I'm not so sure.
I could be misunderstanding the question here, but I think that early on, when it came to things like social distancing and limiting the size of our building or our attendance and all that, we had said, hey, we're going to obey guidelines unless it is a clear instance of religious persecution. So perhaps this person is suggesting that when we said that, we were saying then we sort of obligated ourselves to comply with this directive if we're not going to call it religious persecution. I could be misinterpreting them, but that's what I take that to mean.
Yeah. So
yes, I mean, and go ahead.
No. I think that let's hang on to that question, and as we continue to talk through, if it doesn't resolve itself, please let's see if we can re-ask that question. Here's the other thing: is that when one of the things that we talked about when we were talking about guidelines versus this is it was saying it was suggestion, and then it kept using the word must. They must do this. That is the other reason why it was a mandate. They were mixing up their words and their verbiage, and what they're trying to do is gently command something. So they used words like, hey, it's a guideline, it's a suggestion, but if you constantly use the word must, then that is actually a mandate. Okay, so it says the mandate seems unconstitutional. I'm trying to look at, here we go. The mandate seems unconstitutional, directly contradicting, it keeps sliding, it keeps scrolling past it. Hello, here we go. Contradicting the First Amendment Bill of Rights, Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise of religion. So once again, I do want to be very cautious on this, and I had a discussion with somebody about this today. You're allowed to have views on civil matters. You're allowed to say, this, I believe, violates my civil rights, and I'm going to have a civil discussion and say, I don't want the government impinging on my civil rights. I believe that that is a completely legitimate conversation, but we need to make sure that we keep it separate from religious conversation. Because what we've tended to do in America is blend it a little too much with America and Christianity as if they're the same thing. That the Constitution is not in the Bible. And when we start talking about that kind of stuff, let's make sure we keep them separate, that it is still appropriate to fight back and to argue and to debate whether or not the America that you are supporting is following through on what it was supposed to say. All of that is completely legitimate. I just need Christians to separate out those two conversations. They do not lump into the same area. We tend to do that way too much. Okay. And then go ahead. Did you have one?
Lance, yeah, I want to sort of synthesize a couple of questions here, because I think that there's a lot of, and I've heard a lot of this language in the last couple of days, and you have as well, I'm sure, and there have been different questions kind of to this effect, even that have shown up in the thread here. But there's a lot, you hear a lot of the same language. You talk about things like fear, and you talk about caving, and things like that. And I knew when we made this decision that would be the reaction of some, and I certainly respect anyone's right to react the way that they're going to, and that's all fine. I mean no disrespect in bringing this up, but I think it's really important to maybe talk about the role that fear or caving to the government did or did not play in this decision. Pastor Lance, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So this is kind of very, very important that everybody is aware of. When I made the determination, and once again, there was a differing opinion, but ultimately it has to come back to my decision making. When I made this decision, the only option off the table was telling our congregation not to sing. The discussion came to be whether we were going to continue in civil disobedience or whether or not we were going to use our other available option. That was the only two decisions on the table. I was never going to allow a silencing of worship in the church because I feel that passionate about it. And what that means is that I was completely ready and willing and prepped to just push right through and say, we are not going to do this for a bigger reason. I know everyone has been talking about slippery slope. We just need to understand that I need to do what is right, period, not in fear of what is a slippery slope. Now, so when people are like, oh, well, you took the easy way out, that is what is really, really important that I need everyone to understand, because it gives the impression that somehow what I was preaching and what we did were not in alignment. I've always preached, and I'll tell everybody right now, there will come a time when persecution's going to come in and I will go to jail. That is very likely to happen in my lifetime. I don't believe that that is yet. But I have decided in the Lord a long time ago that I will go to jail for my faith. I will walk into the fiery furnace. That's how it goes. There is no avoiding. I've never avoided controversy. Our whole church has been rife with controversy. It's kind of what we do because we always end up walking into difficult times. The decision was made because at the time, our current environment, and I'm not going to go into details on what I mean by our current environment, we were not able to carry out and walk forward appropriately to continue to meet on campus in civil disobedience. I was willing to do so. That would have been a completely legitimate response, in my opinion. We did not have the proper setup in order to do that. And unfortunately, I can't go into any more detail than that, but we do need to realize I have to do what is both available to me, not just what we all dream would be easiest to do. Armchair quarterbacking is a lot easier when you don't know all the details about what's actually going on within the inner workings. So if you knew what I knew, you would make the exact same decision. Having said that, this is where you would have to trust me that although I would stand up, I actually ended up doing the thing that I like the least. So when people go, well, you took the easy way out, I actually took the hardest route because I refuse to change that. But at the same time, it left me with nothing but controversy and problems. So all I'm doing is cleaning up and mopping up things. So it is not an issue of avoiding risk. That is not a problem for me and a problem for our church. So maybe you guys have some other questions on that. I'm not sure how much I can dig down because once again, there are also some decisions that need to be handled within our leadership and behind closed doors, and they need to be handled. I have always determined that I will not try to use my leverage of being a leader and having a microphone, use my leverage to get what I want. I'm not going to use it against anybody else. I'm not going to use it to tear down our church. So for me, I'm just going to tell you, there was one answer that was always off the table. I was never going to stop the praise of God in our building. Now, everything else then became an option. And so anyway, that was it. Okay. And then let's move forward. Did I see a question about transparency? Did somebody just send one in there?
Oh, well, you were just saying how there were different elements to this that you couldn't really speak to further.
No.
And they were just kind of questioning.
Yes.
That. Yeah.
Why can't you tell us if we are so transparent? Because if I decide and choose and my words put someone else personally in a bad light or some other group in a bad light, that bad is on me, right? So as much as I'm transparent about myself, At the same time, I'm not going to expose other individuals and speak for them. That is inappropriate. So that's the reason. It's not a lack of transparency that I don't want you to know. It's a lack of transparency because of the issue of confidentiality, privacy, but mostly it's just respect. It's just respect.
And making sure that we're representing, I think, Lance, not to put words in your mouth here, but I think you want to make sure that we're representing people accurately, right?
Yes.
That there's some, we just want to make sure that that's what's going on here. Now, you spoke to Lance, and you said this at the start of your teaching this weekend, and it was really powerful and you've said this already, that you're not going to shut down praise and worship in our building. And I thought some of the ways that you spoke to that in some of the meetings we had, and then even before the services this weekend was pretty powerful. Could you maybe just speak to why in your mind that was really a non-starter for you, that we couldn't allow that to stop? And then maybe can you just briefly talk about, okay, what were the other two decisions, or the other two options that were on the table as we sought to kind of make this decision?
So first of all, when I was offended by the phrase singing, what we do at church is not singing. What we do at church is the public proclamation of the glory of God. The reason why I was a non-starter is that I believe that we had two mandates that clashed. One mandate in scripture was the public proclamation of God's glory. The other mandate was to follow the authorities of our land. Only when there is a clear biblical discrepancy should we then step into civil disobedience, right? That was the idea, that I will follow God rather than I will follow man. It has nothing to do with, I don't like how my government's doing something, so I'm going to rebel. That's actually not what the Christian mandate is. The Christian mandate is when God's law when a man's law violates God's law. That's actually what Christian rebellion would look like. Now, when we talk about singing in church, it is not singing. That what highlighted it for me is the fact that when we go to church, too many of us have the mindset, I'm either going to sing or not sing based on how I feel. Oh, I'm not feeling it today, I'm not going to sing. But it's not for you. What I have shared with our staff and leadership is I will make any personal adjustments for my creature comforts in order to obey the law. But the minute it is a violation of God, meaning it doesn't have to do with me, it's now taking something away from the Lord. If it's taking away from me, I'm allowed to have stuff take away from me. Absolutely. And I will bend over backwards because my creature comforts and my personal opinions and my civil rights are not guaranteed to me. But taking away from God's glory was a non-starter because it wasn't about humans. It was about God. When we come in to do that worship at the beginning, praise is different. We say, well, we can worship in our hearts. I appreciate that. Yes, we can, because song is only one form of worship, but praise is always verbal. Praise is always verbal because we're notifying the supernatural and the natural of who God is. And even if the state ignorantly, or even if they did it on purpose, ever said, don't do that, I believe that was taking away from God, and I couldn't do that. So that's a little bit of a deeper reason on why that was a non-starter.
Yeah, and I think that's really important for us to hear. So
yeah, no, there was another question. It said, the rest of the country does feel this is a persecution, and they all know this is a test case. And if we cave, the rest of the country doesn't stand a chance. So we do have to understand that ultimately the church is in the Lord's hands, and we're supposed to do our primary job. And so our primary job is today, what have we been called to do, and what has God given us? And so we do the best that we know how. I don't think that us making a poor decision in the place that God has put us would do the country any good, quite frankly. And then the other one said, can we praise outside? I just need you guys to know, first of all, that was not mandated, guidelined out, that outside does have availability. So we are scrambling like crazy to figure out how we get the body together so that we can actually do that. To be able to praise together. I think that there's something beautiful about praising together. As much as we can praise alone in our homes, there's something beautiful about praising together. So we are still on the warpath to figuring out how to get us together to praise collectively because it is so important. So yes, well done. And then go ahead.
So I wonder, Pastor Lance, would it be all right? Can I just speak a little bit to my own sort of process and how I process some of this stuff? Because I think it speaks to some of the questions that have come through, and folks may or may not agree with my process or the things that inform my decision. But I think it's important, especially as it speaks to this question of civil disobedience. Is I think so. First of all, just my own background. I think about, I'm not a doctor, obviously, but I am the son of a doctor, who, I've said this before on the after party, who has worked with COVID positive patients, who developed symptoms, had to be tested, the whole thing. Thankfully, that test came back negative. So I have a big heart for the medical community. I listen to a lot of Christian leaders around the country and the ways that they're processing a lot of this and all of these different perspectives. And then as my own, the stewardship of being a leader of this church, Pastor Lance asked us to fast and to pray. And certainly I did that, as we had kind of these three options on the table. And I said, kind of in my own process, there are a few just things that I just never want to enter into the equation when it comes to making big decisions, especially when it comes to our church. I want to get my personal opinion out of the way as best I can. And that's something that Pastor Lance asked us to do, that I need to separate what is my personal opinion and what do I really feel like God's telling me based on, the wisdom I'm able to gain and different things like that. I never want to make decisions out of fear. Because when you make decisions out of fear, they're rarely the right ones. I never make decisions with any sort of political thing in mind. My personal feelings about Governor Newsom or President Trump or the mayor of Lincoln, whose name I couldn't even tell you, zero. They factor absolutely zero into my decision making. What I want to do is I want to again say, okay, God, what are you really calling us to do? And then how do we need to respond? And to Pastor Lance's point, I'm absolutely right there with him, that if the day comes where the government is trying to tell the church what to say, if the government is going to deem the preaching of God's word as hate speech, like we can share a cell, Lance, and I'll go to jail with you. I'm ready to take that stand. But the question that I really had to wrestle with for me personally was, is this a time for civil disobedience? Now, and to be clear, I was not afraid of the government reaction to this. I think the worst thing that was going to happen is maybe, I don't know, a notice or something. I was not afraid of a fine. I wasn't afraid of getting hauled off to jail. I wasn't afraid of any of that. But to me, the question was, is this the time for civil disobedience? And for me, in order to with a clear conscience before God, for me to engage in civil disobedience, this would have to be a clear issue of religious persecution. And I just couldn't get there in my mind. I think the science is solid enough that there are certainly questions around the safety of indoor singing. Yes, it is unfortunate that a practice, as Lance has eloquently stated, that is so central to the praise of God's glory, there's physiology around it that can make it unsafe in a big crowd. And I think that that's unfortunate. But the fact of the matter is, we have options to be able to worship and praise God. Nobody took away worship. Nobody took away worship. We need to be very clear about that. But what has happened is we cannot sing and worship God indoors. And that means for us, we need to get creative as a church leadership team. And we have a responsibility before you to figure out, okay, how can we find a way in the midst of all of this to do these things? I've been very clear from the beginning. I think we have a responsibility to love our neighbors in this. And I think that in seeking to be as safe as we possibly can, and in seeking to comply with guidelines that are not religious persecutions, I think that we're seeking to love our neighbors and to do good by our community. Now, you can disagree with me on that. I don't view this as a slippery slope issue. I just don't. I view it as pretty different. So I hope that you recognize, at least for me, that my thought process was not motivated by fear. I don't view that. In many ways, it would have been much easier to defy and to engage in religious persecution, and that would have made things a lot easier. But I just wanted to share sort of my heart in that, so you can see. And again, like Lance said at the beginning, I'm not trying to persuade anybody here. I just want you to know my process here and the extent to which and I know that all of our elders and leaders, even if we thought differently on it, really, really earnestly tried to say, okay, God, what are you really calling us to do? So I just wanted to share a little bit of kind of my heart there. I'm sure tons of questions have come in and all of that. But yeah, Pastor Lance, why don't you lead us into something else?
Sure. Well, just to highlight, one of the difficulties of this season is that it kept pitting mandate against mandate. So I already shared that it was saying, well, we have one thing to respect our authorities, and the other thing was to publicly proclaim God's glory. We had two mandates clash, so that made it messy. What Pastor Brian just highlighted was we have a witness before the world as to how we handle our stuff. Are we just going to get all up in our religious bonnets and just say, I'm going to do they already think we don't look at science. They already think that we're these bogus creationists, blah, blah, blah. So they're looking to see how we're going to handle it. And so are they going to, how will the testimony go? Will the testimony to the world, which Paul was very concerned, the Apostle Paul was very, very concerned about the testimony of the church. How's it going to be viewed? And so we need to take that very seriously. How will it be viewed? And then how will it be viewed by the church? So we had two different things clashing. The church would see it as running away, and yet, which many of you have said that we were running away, and yet at the same time, the world would see it as you're just doing your religious thing and not caring about me as your neighbor and my health. And so we had two testimonies clashing at each other. So I wanted to highlight, this is what makes it so complicated. There was a question that was brought up and it said, how can we say that we're protesting something by shutting down church and going back to our homes? Protests are public. I never said that we were protesting by shutting down and going home. I said that we were complying. Protest was the statement that we were putting the governor on notice that there will come a time if there is a stepping into what we deem as inappropriate religious persecution, then we will go into civil disobedience. So we were putting on notice of a protest to come in the future if we deem that appropriate. So in other words, I'm not pretending like we were doing a great protest. We were actually working with what we were given and making sure that God was honored while at the same time we worked with what we had. That's actually what we did. So once again, I'm not believing, there was no hiding under a bushel. There's no running away. There was simply we're going to work with what we have because we're not doing what they asked us to do. We do know that. And then have you thought to ask to be invited into the governor's task teams to give guidance regarding faith communities? In the letter, first of all, I didn't know that he had one. One of the large critiques of Governor Newsom from a lot of people is that there's not a whole lot of input being sought. But if there is that task team, man, I would love to be a part of it. But in that notice, I did if you read the letter, I did cite out and said, maybe you don't have a lot of guidance on this issue, because it was said in a way that would have been very offensive. There's a couple.
Pastor Lance, maybe you could speak to this. Maybe you could speak to this question because it's come up in a few different areas. And I will preface it by saying everything's on the table. We are actively working on all sorts of different solutions. But could you maybe explain a little bit why up to this point we have not sought to do the outdoor option up to this point, and then even maybe just where we're at in terms of conversation for what we could do outdoors? And I can chime in on that a little bit towards the end. But can you maybe talk about why we haven't done that so far?
Yeah. So I was driving to church in this weekend, I was, lamenting the fact that we weren't together, and I was lamenting the fact that we couldn't be outside. And I realized, I said, ooh, what about Sunday morning? And realized our 11 o'clock service would have been 95 degrees. So right now, there's two primary reasons why it is very difficult to do church outside. Some person brought up the beautiful idea that we've thrown around ourselves is, how can we go outside to sing worship and then come back in and do the message, right? So we could kind of have the best of both worlds. The problem is logistically, it's a lot of moving of people, and we end up having two different sound systems and we are actually not set up to do that. It's kind of an either or. Now we're trying to think of hybrid methods. So you might see something like that. Don't get me wrong. We're going to get uber creative in any way we can to get us back together. So one is logistics. The other one is just sheer heat. We happen to be having this dialogue in July, and July in the greater Sacramento area is brutal. So if we were having this maybe in the early spring where it was nice outside, that would be a little bit different. The other thing is, just to give you guys a little more behind the scenes, we had our tech guy, the head of our creative arts, go out and study and do a whole mock setup of what it would be in the courtyard and how we could actually see a television set. And then we said, well, we'd have to buy an LED wall, and the LED wall for the outside was super, super expensive, and we would have had to get it right now. And then it was on order for 5 weeks, which means we would have to rent it, which was the same cost as buying one. So while you're waiting to buy one, you rent one for the same cost, and you had to have it a certain size and angled a certain way because the sun outside stopped you from being able to see it. And that would only allow a certain amount of people in the courtyard. So in other words, we've examined this backwards and forwards everywhere on our property, and we're trying to find a way, and we will find a way. Yeah. But right now we couldn't get it done quickly. That was our problem. We got jammed up with time frames.
Yeah, and the hindrance to the online audience, which I think you alluded to at the start of that, would be significant in that, I mean, we've got thousands of people watching online every weekend, most of whom would either simply would not be able to attend an outdoor service or would be severely inconvenienced to attend an outdoor service. I'm thinking about the elderly, those with small children, health conditions, a variety of different factors. And when we're in a position where we have to pick one or the other, and we can't do both, that does make it challenging. Now, again, we have, I don't want to speak too specifically just because I don't want to start promising things that we can't deliver on, but we are actively thinking about all different things we can do. And even maybe, thinking, and this I will say specifically, I think sometime in the next couple of weeks, we're going to figure out some way to gather together outside. I don't know if it's on a weekday evening or whatever. We're going to figure it out, to just some simple music, some prayer. We're going to pray for our community, for the world, for our nation, for God to eradicate this disease, for unity, for all that stuff. And we're going to find a way to get together outside. So we have a million logistical questions to figure out. And for those of you, and I'm not a technical guy, so I'm even saying this with quite a bit of ignorance. For those who just don't have experience trying to run outdoor events, please just recognize it is extremely complicated. It is not as simple as, oh, well, you just plug some stuff in and then you go. So, but we're gonna figure it out for you because it's really important.
So another question was, it says, I may have read the letter wrong, but I felt like the tone was one of extreme concern that the government is getting close to persecuting or shutting down the church. Did I read that tone correctly? And do you feel like the government is going down that road? Quite frankly, I think that secular society is always going down that road. I do think the road is a lot slower than most people think that it is. I think that we tend to read a lot as religious persecution when I don't think that it is. But do I think that there are people actively seeking to find a way to eliminate the church? Oh, of course I do. Of course I do. Do I think that that's really high on the government's priority list? No, I think that there's a lot of things high on the government's priority list, and I don't think we're one of them. Quite frankly, I think that we are a nuisance, if anything, to be honest with you. Yeah. Here's the idea. Is the idea to follow the mandate now, but possibly go against it if it gets carried out too long? No, the idea is not necessarily about the amount of time. It's whether or not we had other options. Now, somebody mentioned, they said, don't say that being online is the same as being in person. I completely agree with you. What we have online currently is a sharing of services. We do not even yet have full online church. I believe that full online church that we will have someday, I believe, and I share this with my team, I believe we can get to 80% legit church if you did everything right. We're not even close to that right now. What we have is an anemic version of what it is. So if this does extend over a long period of time, we have to do something else because we're going to languish. So yeah. I'm agreeing with all of you. It is not the exact same thing. Now, sometimes that's all we have. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, totally. Can I just want to speak to that as well. That yeah, absolutely. Online church is not the same as in person. And I think a question came through, which is a great question. Do we believe people engage the same at home as they would have in the building? No, I don't. I think some people did, but inevitably, I like the rest of you, I've been at home for church most of these last 12 weeks and, got kids climbing on me and different things going on. And it is what it is. I know it's not the same. And I think that's another important element that I neglected earlier when I was talking about my own process in terms of how did I, even both decisions for the church and then decisions in terms of the way my family, the way we're choosing to live our lives in this time. for me, it was about how do we get back into being able to have regular weekend services that are as close to what we've had before as quickly as possible. And even the issue of praising God through singing, the question I'm asking is, how do we reduce that as little as possible? And in my mind, my hope was okay, let's sacrifice now for the purpose of just all playing our part to get Placer County's numbers in a better place, to get to where, Placer County just shut down a bunch of indoor dining today. Like, things are not going well here. And I'm going, okay, how can we make small sacrifices now for the purposes of getting us to a more sustained place later? Because something that I think is a very legitimate concern is that if we don't take this seriously now, things could potentially get worse. And then we're in a position where significantly more restrictive measures, not just on us, but on society at large, could be placed in. And that's terrible. And this is coming from somebody who I talk to our youth pastors multiple times a week. How can we get kids together? How can we get kids together? I'm talking to our children's department multiple times a week. Man, it's so tough not to be around kids. So everything, I can speak for me, and I'm pretty sure I can speak for you, Pastor Lance, in this. Everything in my thought process is, what can we do to get us to the place where we can meet together on a regular basis in the way that we all know and love as quickly as possible? Now, that's not to say that I'm right. And that's not to say that any one of us is right. We all, time will tell if we did the right things. But I think it's important to recognize, and I hope that we can all be united around those ends to say, hey, we all want these same things. We're just trying to figure out how to get there.
Yeah. Let me grab a couple other pieces real quick. It says your letter states that Bridgeway is doing partial resistance. Please explain. The actual, what it says, if you read the guidelines really carefully, it says that even live streaming, that you're not supposed to have more than one or two people singing at a time. And so, meaning even in live stream, just this morning, we had more than that. We had 3 people, vocalist playing. We do not mask when we're trying to sing. I do not mask when I'm trying to preach. All that stuff may, depending on your version, is actually in violation of the code. We're not going to stop that. That's what I meant by partial disobedience. And then it says, resistance without risk isn't really resistance. Resistance costs something. There's no cost, no discomfort, no risk of going back home. I'm just going to tell you, I disagree with you. I don't know if that was a gentleman or a lady, but you are absolutely incorrect. If you think there's no cost to this, the cost is significant. Unfortunately, that's not a comment that was made in wisdom. Are outdoor services a possibility when the weather cools down? Yes. Why? Let's see. It said, let's see. Go ahead, Brian. I can't. I'm tracking these.
Just question came through about, have you been in dialogue with any other churches about kind of what's going on? And maybe we don't want to name names, but I could answer that, but maybe you could go first.
No, I think it's all over the board. So we had churches just at the beginning. Some churches opened up, some churches didn't. I actually oversee 11 young senior pastors in all their churches, and I would say 3/4 of them still have not opened up yet because of all this. So they actually never tried to go back in person. And so you have some really large churches that have continued on. Some have taken a very strong stance. Some have quieted the congregation. So actually it's all across the board. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah. And then, same. I mean, I've interacted with some friends who are pastors at other churches, and to be honest with you, we're just all trying to support each other. Like, I think we're all facing really, really hard decisions. And if anything, I think it's been really great to see just some unity amongst brothers and sisters at other churches who just, we're all trying to just communicate and support one another. Question came through, why is the church not more aggressively encouraged at home gatherings? We've mentioned a couple of times that outdoor home gatherings would be a good idea. We've encouraged our missional communities, those who are comfortable, to have outdoor gatherings with social distancing and everything else. I personally, I would love it if more people were getting together outdoors to watch services and things like that. I wonder a little bit about the practicality of it, how many people have a setup where really watching church outdoors would be possible. But certainly for those who can, I would absolutely encourage it. I don't encourage indoor gathering. I mean, just be personally, I've not been in favor of us encouraging that, just because there's tons of data out there suggesting that multi-household indoor gatherings are potentially pretty risky. But I love the idea for those that are able to gather outside and watch a service together. And amongst our missional community leaders, we have absolutely encouraged outdoor gathering for their group meetings. So that's something we think is a great idea.
One thing I do want to address, I saw a number of comments. Yeah, there was a number of comments that came in that was talking about this idea that, well, it was really hot in the Middle East and Jesus did it and he didn't have megaphones and all that stuff. So let me just address that real quick. First of all, you have a cultural society that was willing to do certain things that our cultural society won't. All we did was ask people initially to wear masks to come in and socially distant, and we didn't have people show up. So I understand that it's romantic to think that everyone's going to be outside in 95-degree weather because that's what Jesus did. But you have to understand their clothing style was adjusted for that. Their lifestyle was adjusted for that. Their whole cultural setup was adjusted for that. The other thing is a lot of times it was just men, young men. And so if I was just leading a men's group, I would probably make you bake in the heat at 101 degrees and tell you that we're just going to suck it up and move on. But we actually have a congregation of a lot of different type of people. And we have demonstrated as a congregation that we weren't even willing to do smaller changes to actually meet together. And yet we have made sometimes we make some pretty bold statements about what we should be doing. I hope that we all recognize through this season that God is training us. He's taking everything that is a creature comfort and he's taking it away. In other words, there are many of us that weren't even attending church, but once every 4 or 5 weeks. And now all of a sudden you can't. And now all of a sudden it hurts. That God is poking and saying, why did we take that for granted before? There were many of us that didn't want to sing at all out loud. And then when we couldn't, we got upset, but we weren't singing in the first place. And praising God publicly. That there were many of us that didn't even take small groups seriously. We never even got involved in a small group. And then all of a sudden that was stopped and we got upset. That there are many of us that are trying to say that we're really upset about this, but we weren't engaging in the first place. And so I feel like God is trying to lure us and say, my children, we have had such beautiful blessings. When this clears, will you please take advantage of the blessings that I have for you? You may not have them forever. So I believe this is one of those wonderful discipleship moments between us and the Lord. I believe that we're going to be stronger as we move out of this. Right now, it's super hard. It's miserable. I know a bunch of you are disappointed in me. I'm not quite sure I could have done anything different with what I had in front of me, or I would have done it. But I will tell you this. God is not stopped. He's not shut down, and he's doing extraordinary things, and we will be a better church after this. Right now, we're hanging on and we're making do. That I can tell you. And many of you are wonderful and brilliant and have amazing ideas. And you know what? The more and more you get involved in the leadership of the church, the more you can help steer us in the right direction. So once again, I'm going to do a little call for everyone to get involved. I actually had a number of volunteers right after we made the announcement that things were going to get harder and there wasn't going to be anybody in the building, just say they're not going to show up. You guys, I'm just telling you, I think we've had it really, really well. And I think that the Lord is actually challenging both Pastor Brian and myself and our other leaders to dig in deeper and think, what do we need to train in our people to begin to have a deep impression of transformation and change? So I can commit to you to try to be a better leader. I can commit to you to leading our teams better so we can dig in, and that when hard times come, that we can sail above them. We got a little bit shipwrecked on this one, and we'll do better next time. I sure hope so.
All right. We're 3 minutes over, and that was a beautiful mic drop moment, but I'm not going to let you have it because I want you to speak to one more thing that I think could be really powerful here. This is the year of connection, and we have heard how many excellent sermons from you, from Pastor Matt, on the topic of unity. And here we are facing, it seems like, divisive issue after divisive issue after divisive issue. Can you just speak to us as we wrap here? How can we, whatever we think about the issues that have been discussed tonight, how can we as a church and how can we as individuals be people who fight for unity and glorify God in our unity, even as we struggle to agree and to understand each other in all of this? Could you maybe speak to that?
Yeah. So it's a matter of priority. I want us to have our priorities right. So the first thing that we have to do is honor the Lord. The Lord is the primary of all this stuff. So whatever we're going to do, everything else doesn't matter if God is not fully glorified and his testimony is right and things like that. So that is the first piece. The second piece that we are told to love the Lord with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second one is we have to treat other people in love. So if you're doing what you're doing and it is in the spirit of love and unity, we're going to win every time. After that is things like wisdom and issues and processing and civil issues. And you're allowed to be passionate about those. You're allowed to have great opinions. You're allowed to be able to speak against something and make it better. And it's okay to disagree. And all those things are all true. But I just want the order right. Because if you can still do mighty, forceful work in our nation to bring it and make it right, while still honoring the Lord and being loving in it, you win every time. That's the bottom line. So unity for me is much more about priorities.
Yeah. Boom. Boom. Love it. All right. Wow. Hey, not bad after 4 sermons to an almost empty room, my friend. Great job.
Yes.
We had so many people watch and comment and participate and ask questions. What an honor that you would spend part of your evening with us. So thank you so much to all of you for joining us. We love you. And we are going to leave the question of, is the after party resuming? We're going to leave that unanswered for now because I don't think we even know, and we're tired. So have a great night. Love to you all. We'll see you.